In the small, unassuming town of Pines End, I grew up enveloped in an atmosphere thick with secrecy and unease. The townsfolk moved about their lives as if guided by an invisible hand, adhering to strange rules that governed our very existence. Among these peculiarities, the most unsettling was the monthly parade, an event shrouded in mystery and fear. We were strictly forbidden from watching it, and any attempt to step outside during the festivities was met with silent disapproval and disapproving glances from our neighbors, who seemed to share a collective understanding of the dangers that lurked just beyond our doors. As a child, I often pressed my nose against the window, straining to catch a glimpse of the vibrant colors and sounds that filled the streets outside. The laughter and music, however, were always accompanied by an undercurrent of dread that sent shivers down my spine. My parents would pull me away from the window, their faces pale and drawn, warning me in hushed tones that curiosity could lead to dire consequences. They spoke of the spirits that roamed the night, their voices trembling with fear, and I learned to fear the shadows that danced just beyond my sight, lurking in the corners of my imagination. Years passed, and I moved away from Pines End, seeking a life far removed from its eerie grasp and the memories that haunted my dreams. Yet, despite my efforts, the memories of that place lingered, twisting my thoughts and creeping into my subconscious. I often found myself pondering the town's strange residents, those who seemed to defy the very passage of time itself. There were whispers of new apartments that appeared overnight, their occupants never quite fitting in, as if they had stepped out of a different era altogether. The townsfolk spoke of these newcomers in hushed tones, their eyes darting nervously as they recounted chilling tales of the undead, people who had lived in Pines End for generations, yet never aged a day, their faces frozen in time. Returning to Pines End after years of absence, I felt an overwhelming sense of nostalgia mixed with an undercurrent of dread that clung to me like a heavy cloak. The town looked the same, yet everything felt off-kilter, as if the very fabric of reality had shifted. The familiar streets were lined with trees that seemed to lean closer, their branches stretching out like skeletal fingers, as if eavesdropping on my thoughts and secrets. I made my way to my childhood home, a place that had once felt safe and welcoming but now loomed ominously in the distance, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out for me. As I walked through the town square, I noticed that the townsfolk were still bound by the same peculiar rules that had governed our lives. They moved in unison, eyes cast downward as they prepared for the upcoming parade, their expressions vacant and devoid of emotion. I could feel the tension in the air, a palpable fear that gripped everyone around me, wrapping itself around my heart like a vice. I approached an old woman selling flowers, hoping to glean some information about the parade and its significance, desperate for answers. "Why can't we watch?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. She looked up, her eyes clouded with a mix of sorrow and understanding, as if she had seen too much in her lifetime. "It's not for us to see, dear. The parade is a celebration of what lies beyond. Those who watch, they don't come back the same," she replied, her voice tinged with a warning that sent a chill down my spine, igniting a spark of curiosity within me. Her words hung in the air like a dark omen, and despite the fear that gripped me, I felt an insatiable curiosity gnawing at my insides. What could possibly happen during that parade that would change a person forever? I decided then that I would not be a prisoner of my fear or the town's ominous warnings. I would find a way to witness the event, to uncover the truth that had haunted me for so long, no matter the cost. As the day of the parade approached, I began to notice strange occurrences around town. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, darting away whenever I turned to look, and whispers seemed to follow me wherever I went, murmuring secrets just out of reach. I found myself drawn to the old library, a place filled with dusty tomes and forgotten knowledge, as if it held the key to understanding the mysteries of Pines End. Perhaps there, among the crumbling pages and forgotten stories, I could uncover the secrets that had eluded me for so long. Inside, I scoured the shelves, searching for anything that could shed light on the town's history, desperate to piece together the puzzle that had haunted my childhood. I stumbled upon a faded journal belonging to a former resident, filled with ramblings about the parade and the darkness that enveloped the town like a shroud. The entry spoke of a curse that had befallen Pine's End, a pact made long ago with forces beyond comprehension. The townsfolk had traded their freedom for a semblance of peace, binding themselves to the whims of the supernatural, and I could feel the weight of their despair echoing through the pages. The more I read, the more I felt the weight of the town's history pressing down on me, suffocating in its intensity. I learned of those who had tried to escape, only to be drawn back in by the very essence of Pine's End, as if the town itself were alive, feeding off the fear and despair of its inhabitants. It was as if the very ground beneath my feet was imbued with the sorrow of countless souls, trapped in an endless cycle of suffering. As night fell, I prepared for the parade, my heart racing with anticipation and dread. I found a hidden spot, concealed by thick foliage, where I could observe without being seen, my pulse quickening as the first notes of music echoed through the streets. The air crackled with energy, charged with a sense of foreboding, and I could feel the ground tremble beneath me, as if the very earth itself was awakening. The parade began with a procession of figures draped in flowing garments, their faces obscured by masks that shimmered in the moonlight. They moved with an otherworldly grace, gliding along the cobblestone streets as if floating above the ground, their movements mesmerizing and eerie. The townsfolk watched from their homes, their expressions vacant, as if entranced by the spectacle before them, their eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and awe. As the parade progressed, I noticed something unsettling. The figures seemed to change, their forms shifting and warping as they danced, twisting into grotesque shapes that sent shivers down my spine. I felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to join them, to step out from my hiding place and become part of the celebration. But I resisted, reminding myself of the warnings I had heard, the chilling tales that echoed in my mind. Suddenly, a figure broke away from the procession, moving toward my hiding spot with purpose. My heart raced as I realized it was a woman, her mask adorned with intricate designs that shimmered in the moonlight, casting eerie reflections on the ground. She stopped just a few feet away, her gaze piercing through the mask as if she could see me, her presence both captivating and terrifying. "Why do you hide?" she asked, her voice melodic yet laced with an unsettling undertone that sent chills racing down my spine. "Join us, and you will understand," she urged, her words wrapping around me like a siren's call. I shook my head, fear flooding my senses as I struggled to maintain my composure. "I can't. I need to know what this is," I replied, my voice trembling with uncertainty. She smiled, a chilling expression that sent shivers down my spine, her gaze unwavering. "Knowledge comes at a price. Are you willing to pay?" she asked, the weight of her words hanging heavily in the air. Before I could respond, she reached out, her hand brushing against my arm. A jolt of energy surged through me, and I was transported to a different realm, a vast expanse filled with swirling shadows and flickering lights. The parade continued around me, but now I saw its true nature, the facade crumbling away to reveal the darkness beneath. The figures were not merely performers, they were the lost souls of Pine's End, trapped in an endless cycle of celebration and despair. Their laughter echoed through the void, a haunting melody that resonated with my very being, filling me with an overwhelming sense of sorrow. I could feel their pain, their longing for freedom, and I realized that the parade was not just a celebration, it was a ritual to appease the darkness that held them captive, a desperate attempt to mask their suffering. Panic surged within me as I struggled to comprehend what was happening, my heart racing with fear. I wanted to escape, to return to the safety of my hiding place, but the shadows tightened around me, pulling me deeper into their grasp. I could hear the whispers of the townsfolk, their voices merging into a cacophony of despair that echoed in my mind. "Help us," they cried, their voices filled with anguish. "We cannot escape." In that moment, I understood the truth of Pine's End. It was a town bound by a curse, a place where the past and present intertwined, trapping its residents in a never-ending cycle of fear and sorrow. I was not an outsider. I was part of the very fabric of this place, woven into its dark tapestry. With a surge of determination, I fought against the shadows, reaching out to the lost souls. "You don't have to remain here," I shouted, my voice echoing through the void, filled with a fierce resolve. "You can break free." The figures paused, their movements faltering as they turned to me, hope flickering in their eyes like a dying flame. Together, we channeled our collective energy, pushing against the darkness that sought to bind us, refusing to be consumed by despair. The shadows writhed and twisted, but we stood firm, united in our desire for freedom, our spirits intertwined in a desperate struggle. As the darkness began to dissipate, I felt a warmth enveloping me, a light that pierced through the void, illuminating the shadows that had held us captive for so long. I was pulled back to the streets of Pine's End, the parade still unfolding before me, but now the figures danced with renewed vigor, their laughter now tinged with a sense of liberation and hope. But as I looked around, I realized the townsfolk remained oblivious, their eyes still cast downward, trapped in their own cycle of fear and despair. I understood then that the curse of Pine's End would not be easily broken. The darkness would continue to thrive, feeding on the despair of those who refused to confront their own fears, their ignorance a prison of their own making. I stepped back into the shadows, knowing that my journey was far from over. I would not abandon the souls of Pine's End. I would fight for their freedom, even if it meant facing the darkness that lurked within my own heart. The parade would continue, but I would no longer be a prisoner of my fear. I would become a beacon of hope, a voice for the lost, and together, we would unravel the threads of the curse that bound us to this haunted place, determined to break the cycle of despair. As I turned to leave, I felt the weight of the town's history pressing down on me, but I also felt a flicker of determination igniting within, a spark that refused to be extinguished. Pine's End was a place of shadows, but it was also a place of resilience, a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And as long as I drew breath, I would strive to bring light to the darkness, to uncover the truth hidden within the heart of this cursed town, and to free those who remained trapped in its haunting embrace. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I still vividly recall the day the world transformed into something unrecognizable, although I often wish I could erase that memory entirely. It began like any other unremarkable Tuesday in the lab, filled with the familiar hum of machinery and the soft whispers of my colleagues as they discussed their latest assignments. Our collective focus was divided between the mundane analyses we performed daily and the awe-inspiring wonders of the universe, a realm so distant from our everyday lives yet simultaneously so close, thanks to the recent breathtaking images sent back by the James Webb Space Telescope. Little did I know that one of those images would lead us down a path to a terrifying discovery that would gnaw at our sanity and unravel the very fabric of our reality. The morning commenced with the usual buzz of excitement surrounding fresh data from the telescope. As an astrobiologist, my curiosity was piqued when I was summoned to assist in interpreting a peculiar anomaly captured in one of the images. My palms felt sweaty, a rush of anticipation coursing through me as I approached the screen. The vivid colors of the universe sprawled out like an endless canvas, but something beneath the shimmering stars caught my eye, a dark spot, an absence of light that seemed to pulse ominously. At first glance, it appeared innocuous, perhaps just another cosmic dust cloud or a distant black hole. However, as I zoomed in, what initially seemed like a shadowy mass morphed into something far more intricate and unsettling. It was not until the lead scientist, Dr. Ellen Carter, pointed out specific frames that the panic began to unravel within the room. There, embedded within the darkness, was a series of writhing shapes, twisting and turning with an unsettling grace that sent chills down my spine. "Can you see this?" she asked, her voice trembling ever so slightly, betraying her composed demeanor. "It's almost organic." I squinted at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest as dread pooled in my stomach. The shapes were reminiscent of a giant worm or some alien centipede, its grotesque body undulating against the cosmic backdrop. They seemed to pulse and breathe through the void, and just like that, our ordinary day had succumbed to an overwhelming sense of dread and foreboding. As we delved deeper into the analysis, a wave of unease washed over the lab, creeping into our minds like a slow poison. I could hear hushed whispers among my colleagues, exchanging theories about what we had stumbled upon. Some speculated it could be a new type of cosmic organism, but what was most troubling was its trajectory, directly toward Earth. Days turned into weeks as we painstakingly scrutinized the data, each image revealing more of these creatures, whatever they were, moving closer and closer to our planet. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of my colleagues in hushed conversations, their eyes wide with disbelief. Some attempted to joke nervously, but behind their laughter was a shared apprehension that took root like a dark vine in our hearts, tightening its grip with every passing day. That's when the whispers transformed into something far more sinister. I began hearing strange murmurs echoing in my mind, encounters with nothing I could pinpoint, just fleeting shadows at the edge of my perception. The more we tried to understand, the more these creatures seemed to invade our consciousness, stealing our clarity like thieves in the night, leaving confusion and dread in their wake. The cosmic horrors we were uncovering began to worm their way into our dreams, turning our nights into a battleground of fear. I noticed a troubling shift in Dr. Carter. She grew pale, her expression increasingly vacant, often lost in thought as if fragments of her mind were slipping away like grains of sand through an hourglass. I tried to engage her, but she would stare past me, her gaze anchored somewhere beyond the walls of the lab, lost in a realm I could not reach. "What is happening to us?" I asked her one day, peering into her hollow eyes, desperate for answers. "I can't shake this feeling, like something is inside of me, gnawing at my thoughts." It felt as though we were being watched, each analysis drawing attention not just to us but to the images that haunted our findings. Whoever, or whatever, these creatures were, they didn't just feed on light, they seemed to feed on our very sanity, consuming our thoughts and emotions with insatiable hunger. In early reports, we touched on theories that these entities were consuming light but had no explanation for the way they entwined themselves into our thoughts and memories. Lacking definitive evidence, I raised my voice in meetings, suggesting we might need psychological help or to step back from the research. But my concerns were brushed aside by my superiors, who feared the potential repercussions of a scare about non-existent creatures. Their dismissal only deepened my sense of isolation and dread. Then came the day we received the official notice. A meeting was called at the Center for Space Studies, and murmurs forecasted trouble. I sensed our window for understanding was rapidly closing. As I stepped inside, the atmosphere felt thick with tension, oppressive and suffocating. The sharp faces around the table mirrored my fears, their expressions a mixture of concern and disbelief. "We cannot propagate panic with theories that lack scientific support," our director stated, his voice cold and impassive as he looked around the room. "Many of you will be redirected to other projects if this continues. We need results, not conjecture." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The truth hung heavy in the air, burning our throats with its urgency. I felt a knot twist tighter in my stomach, a visceral reaction to their blatant disregard for the very real terror unraveling right before us. How could they brush this aside? How could they not see the danger that loomed just beyond our understanding? After the meeting, my colleagues looked as stricken as I felt. Some turned to drinking, while others buried themselves deeper into their work, resigned to continue as if nothing had changed. Ellen's health and confidence declined at an alarming rate, her usual brilliance now mired in despair and confusion, a shadow of her former self. The following nights were restless and fraught with anxiety. I lay awake, staring into the darkness, imagining the shapes looming outside my window, hungrily waiting for me to slip into sleep. I began to see them in flashes, tentacles curling around the edges of my vision, teasing my senses. I felt them feeding off my fears, a parasite burrowing deeper into my psyche, and I was powerless to resist. I tried reaching out to others, but every conversation ended in a hollow echo. It seemed no one wanted to acknowledge the severity of our situation. Ellen, now frail and often silent, was the only real connection I had left. She began voicing thoughts I had kept locked away, fears that echoed in the back of my mind. What if they are already influencing us? What if they're in our memories, altering who we are? Fear coiled around us as we confronted our own thoughts, a slow descent into madness as we grappled with the implications of what we had discovered. We were, in many ways, prey to these creatures, and it was terrifying to consider that the world outside remained blissfully unaware of the impending doom that loomed over us. Then came the fateful day when Ellen simply did not show up. Days turned into weeks, and I was soon called in for yet another meeting. This time, it would be my turn to be dismissed. They made it abundantly clear I was no longer a suitable fit. Too many wild ideas, too many theories for such a serious institution. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, as if the very foundation of my career had crumbled beneath my feet. I left the building, my heart racing, feeling the weight of abandonment settle heavily on my shoulders. No one was acknowledging the truth, and I could only picture Ellen's eyes, vacant and drifting into the ether, lost to the darkness that had claimed her. In the following days, my reality blurred into an indistinct haze. The shadows grew more prominent, stretching and shifting in the corners of my vision. Every creak in the night was accompanied by the whisper of my name, echoing in a haunting symphony that ignited primal fear within me. I returned constantly to the images we had captured, desperate to find threads of understanding. Yet in that grasp, I felt the darkness encroach further, tightening its grip around my mind. Each attempt to relive those moments rooted me deeper in a feeling of despair. I started losing time. Chunks of my life slipped through my fingers like sand, leaving me disoriented and confused. Friends I had once confided in began to avoid my calls, pulling away until I was left completely alone, ensnared in the invisible web spun by entities we had unwittingly awakened. It wasn't long before I realized that the black spot was no longer just a threat from the cosmos. It had forged its way into my mind, a living being eager to engulf my very essence, to consume me from within. Then came the creature's final act. One night, as I lay in bed, I felt the weight of reality shift. It was as if the walls were pressing inward, an unseen force bearing down upon me, suffocating in its intensity. I could almost see the grotesque shapes weaving through my thoughts, wrapping around my memories and squeezing the life out of them, leaving only emptiness in their wake. In a moment of resignation, I closed my eyes, and then there was silence, an oppressive void so thick it stung. I felt the entity shift within me, a cold grip settling around my heart, and in that moment, I understood it had come for me. I could sense it devouring my sanity, replacing what was once vibrant with a dull, torturous fog that enveloped my mind. Struggling against the encroaching shadows became impossible, a futile battle against an inevitable fate. Days passed, blending into a tapestry of torment and despair. I wanted to scream, to reach out, to warn the world of the approaching darkness that threatened to consume us all. But my voice felt trapped, an echo bouncing off the hollow walls of my mind, unheard and unacknowledged. Those signals never made it to the stars, nor would they reverberate back to the world we once called home, lost in the vastness of the universe. And then it was done. The darkness enveloped me completely, and with that final breath, my existence melted into the very fabric of what we had once feared. I had become one with the void, a husk of the scientist I used to be, forever lost to the blackness that had claimed me without a trace, a silent witness to the horrors that lay just beyond the veil of understanding. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I remember vividly the day when our expedition to Europa took a sudden turn toward the unknown, a shift that would forever alter our understanding of life beyond Earth. I had always been fascinated by the potential of discovering extraterrestrial life, a passion that had driven my studies and career. However, nothing could have prepared me for the chilling encounter that awaited us beneath the thick, icy crust of this mysterious moon. As part of a dedicated team on the Europa Clipper mission, my sole purpose was to collect and analyze data about the moon's subsurface ocean, a hidden world that held secrets waiting to be unveiled. I had spent countless hours poring over the scientific analyses, straining to grasp the magnitude of the mysteries that lay beneath the icy surface, each moment filled with anticipation and curiosity. When the probe was finally deployed, I felt an electric thrill of anticipation coursing through my veins. Our equipment was a marvel of modern engineering, meticulously designed and equipped with advanced cameras, sensors, and tools that could measure everything from microscopic life forms to geological activity. As we descended through the thick shells of ice, I watched the readings from our thermal sensors flicker with life, each pulse a reminder of the vibrant ecosystem hidden below. The ocean below seemed to pulse with warmth and inviting colors, yet the deeper I marveled at its depths, the more I felt an unsettling sense of being watched, as if unseen eyes were observing our every move. The first signs of life emerged through our cameras, bioluminescent organisms, each glowing like tiny stars in the dark water, illuminating the shadows around us. It would have been awe-inspiring if not for the odd sensation at the back of my mind that we were not alone in this vast, alien world. As our probe ventured deeper into the abyss, the lights began to shift, revealing something unimaginably large lurking in the darkness, a presence that sent shivers down my spine. With my heart racing, I zoomed in on the screen, desperate to capture every detail. A massive silver creature swam gracefully underneath us, its movements fluid and mesmerizing. Its form was sleek and elongated, with scales that shimmered in hues of blue and silver, almost hypnotic in their beauty. But it was its eyes that froze my blood. They were intelligent and focused, clearly observing us with a depth of understanding that I could not comprehend. I felt an instinctive dread crawl up my spine, a primal fear that warned me of the unknown. Is this footage being recorded? I asked our technician, unable to tear my gaze from the screen, my voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed confirmed my worst fear. Our cameras were fully operational, but it seemed as if the creature knew it, as if it were consciously deciding what we could see and what we could not. The realization sent chills through me. We were not merely observers in this world, we were intruders. We continued filming, capturing images of the creature as it circled us, a sentinel in its frozen domain, watching us with an intensity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Another creature appeared, then another, and soon we were surrounded by these magnificent beings. They glided with an elegant fluidity, synchronizing their movements in a way that created a stunning and terrifying display of coordination. Yet instead of beauty, I felt an overwhelming sense of foreboding, like they were protecting something, and we were intruders in their secret world, trespassers in a realm that had remained untouched for eons. As we proceeded further into their territory, the creatures began to show bizarre behaviors, occasionally darting toward the probe's hull as if attempting to mend the small cracks forming due to temperature fluctuations caused by our presence. It was as if they wanted to repair the damage we had unintentionally inflicted upon their environment, a testament to their intelligence and awareness. I marveled at their capabilities, and my scientific curiosity soared to new heights. But deep down, an ice-cold feeling of fear lodged itself in my gut, a nagging doubt that whispered to me, what were they hiding? Our cameras captured every moment, the tension mounting with each frame we recorded. Each report we filed back to base was fraught with unspoken words, laden with the anxiety I began to feel as the situation escalated. The longer the probe remained in the depths, the more hostile the environment seemed to become. I suggested we collect data faster and return home. Nobody should be this far beneath the ice for too long. But such demands were lost in the echoes of my colleagues' fascination. They were entranced by the creature's grace, even as the temperature in the cabin dropped, causing us all to shiver involuntarily. The atmosphere was thick with an unspoken dread, and I could feel the weight of our predicament pressing down on me. Then, just as we neared the supposed epicenter of their activity, it happened. A flicker on the screens drew all attention, a moment that would change everything. The largest of the silver beings, its eyes gleaming with an intensity one could not comprehend, darted forward with astonishing speed. An instant later, it crashed into our vessel with a force that reverberated through the probe. Alarms blared, and the probe shook violently, the lights flickering as chaos erupted around us. My hands flew to the controls, trying desperately to stabilize our position, but it was no use. The systems were failing. The screen filled with static, and the once pristine footage of the aquatic ballet transformed into chaotic shadows and crashing sounds. A disquieting feeling surged through me. It was not mere curiosity fueling their actions now. It was something else entirely, something protective, perhaps defensive, a primal instinct to defend their territory. "Get us out of here!" I yelled, my voice rising above the cacophony of alarms and the chaos unfolding around us. But the command system malfunctioned as we spiraled out of control, our fate hanging in the balance. I watched helplessly as one last silver dart plunged toward the probe, a final act from the creatures, a desperate attempt to protect their home. The screen went blank, and darkness enveloped us, a suffocating void that seemed to stretch on forever. The next thing I knew, the emergency systems kicked in, and alarms blared in a cacophony that matched the panic in my chest. We were losing communication with the probe, a complete blackout loomed over us, and I felt like I was suffocating in the silence that followed. What had we unleashed upon ourselves in our quest for knowledge? The memory of those creatures lingered in my mind, both beautiful and terrifying, an indelible mark on my psyche. I couldn't shake off the feeling that they were not hostile in the traditional sense. They were not monsters, they were guardians of their realm. And we were the intruders, the unwelcome guests in a world that had thrived in isolation. As we raced against time to regain control, I felt compelled to broadcast everything we had encountered, the truth that needed to be shared with the world. The world deserved to know, to prepare for whatever threat lay beneath Europa's icy surface. I desperately began drafting a detailed report, calling for more investigation before anyone else attempted a similar mission, urging caution in the face of the unknown. Even after we finally regained a semblance of contact and brought the probe back, the silver beings haunted my every thought, their presence a constant reminder of our vulnerability. We had spent too long ignoring the signs of life that could perceive us and act upon our presence. While we returned with minimal data, the truth was far more grotesque. We were pawns in a game far beyond our comprehension, caught in a web of mysteries that we had barely begun to unravel. I could not shake off the weight of responsibility as I reflected on our mission. Perhaps it was the silence of the ocean that unnerved me most, a profound stillness as if the entire world had come to a standstill, waiting for us to make our next move. Waiting for us to forget, to dismiss the warnings hidden in the ice. For beneath the seemingly tranquil surface lay something ancient and majestic, a reminder that the universe protects its secrets, even at the cost of intruders who dare to trespass. Would anyone believe our story? Would they understand the urgency of the threat that loomed beneath layers of ice, a danger that could extend far beyond what we had encountered? As I prepared to finalize my report, a singular thought echoed in my mind: some truths are better left undiscovered. The vastness of space had always felt alien and foreboding, yet now I knew that beneath the ice, There were creatures sworn to protect their realm, ready to guard the ancient memories hidden in the depths. We were no longer seekers of knowledge. We had become a liability that would face their wrath once more. And for our kind, it was a lesson that had come too late, a stark reminder of our place in the grand tapestry of the universe. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I remember vividly the first time I stepped into the abyss, an endless expanse where shadows twisted and turned in ways that defied logic and comprehension, casting a veil of dread that hung heavily in the damp air. It was a place that stirred the deepest fears within me, raising questions that gnawed at my mind. What unspeakable horrors could possibly lie lurking in the darkness beneath the surface? Little did I know, the true terrors of the abyss awaited my arrival, some so vile and twisted that they defied any rational understanding. My journey set off at the very edge of the infamous Flagdon Swamp, a treacherous realm known by all who dwelt in surrounding lands. The ground beneath my feet seemed to shift and sway, its nature ever-changing and unpredictable. This swamp was not just any wetland, it was notorious for its deadly waters, which shimmered with a beauty that lured the unwary. Tales of those who had tragically perished within its murky depths haunted my every cautious step as I began to approach the dark waters. As I waded deeper into the swamp, I felt the jagged stones hidden beneath the surface, sharp and unforgiving. Each step forward felt like a battle against the very ground itself, a struggle against sinking into the abyssal waters that beckoned me with their deceptive allure. The stench of decay hung in the air, thick and suffocating, and I soon grasped why people spoke of the swamp with reverence and fear, as if it were a living entity, eagerly waiting to ensnare the unsuspecting souls who ventured too close. Suddenly, the environment shifted around me, its mood twisting into something dark and malicious. Clumps of fog rolled off the water like a living shroud, thick and suffocating, wrapping around me like an icy grip that tightened with every passing moment. A wild gust of wind erupted through the trees, igniting the leaves with rustling sounds that felt like whispered warnings, warning me of the perilous journey I had undertaken. In that eerie moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was watching me, lurking just out of sight. I turned around, half expecting to meet a pair of glowing eyes peering out from the shadows lurking within the trees. The stories I had heard whispered of the swamp's dark nature, that it cherished the souls of the lost, and in that moment, I felt it was preparing to welcome me into its embrace. As I ventured deeper into this malevolent landscape, the swamp's beauty morphed into something sinister. The water began to bubble ominously, creating an unsettling rhythm that echoed through the trees, resonating in my bones. I froze in terror as I realized the ground beneath me began to pulse and thrum, the vibrations syncing with the chaotic heartbeat of the abyss itself. Fear coursed through my veins, and panic set in. There was no time to ponder my fate. I had to escape before the swamp twisted me into one of its many tortured spirits, destined to wander for eternity. Just as I thought I might find my way back, a crackling sound sliced through the stillness, a fire. The dry foliage ignited unexpectedly, flames dancing hungrily in the air and consuming everything in their path. My heart raced as I bolted away from the encroaching inferno, narrowly avoiding the heat that licked at my heels. Amidst my flight, I managed to stumble upon a narrow path, faintly illuminated by the flickering flames that illuminated my desperate escape behind me. It was a path fraught with uncertainty, yet it was my only way forward. Emerging from the suffocating embrace of the swamp, I suddenly found myself facing the infamous maze of coetus. It loomed before me like a labyrinthine beast, its walls seemingly twisting and curling under a malevolent spell of their own making. The tales surrounding this cursed place were legendary, echoing through the cries and whispers of the countless souls lost within its confines. It was spoken of in hushed tones, a warning to those who might seek to explore its icy depths, for it was said that those who ventured within would not only confront the bitter cold, but would also come face to face with their darkest fears. I steeled myself, taking a deep breath, and stepped inside, determined to carve my own path even if it led to my doom. Inside the maze, the air was frigid, sending waves of shivers racing down my spine like 1,000 icy fingers. Darkness enveloped me as I wandered deeper, each corner I turned filling my heart with an overwhelming sense of dread and foreboding. Whispers echoed from every direction, phantoms of those who had walked these halls before. I felt their despair pressing down, an invisible weight that urged me to turn back, to flee while I still had the chance. But retreat was not an option. It was a luxury I could not afford. Incapable of giving in to fear, I pressed on, clinging to a feeble resolve that threatened to crumble like ash in the wind. Navigating the endless corridors became a sinister game of chance. As I moved through the shadows, I stumbled upon strange markings etched into the walls, faded symbols of those who had traversed this hellish expanse long before me. Each mark told a story of tragedy, their spirits intricately woven into the very fabric of the maze. I felt an eerie pull towards their sorrow, their cries echoing in my mind, and for a fleeting moment, I could almost hear their desperate pleas for help blending seamlessly with the wind that whispered around me. Rounding a corner, I abruptly stumbled into a large chamber, its walls lined with mirrors that reflected my own trepidation back at me, amplifying the shadows lurking dangerously behind. Each reflection became a grotesque caricature of my soul, taunting me with twisted distortions of my fears and doubts. I fought hard against the primal urge to look away, knowing that even the slightest distraction could seal my fate within these cursed walls. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I glimpsed a figure moving silently behind me, pale and ethereal. The Pale Witch, a demon whose existence I had only heard of in hushed conversations, took form before me, her presence chilling the very air around us. Her features were razor sharp, and her eyes glowed cold as ice, promising nothing but despair and torment. I felt the icy chill seep deeper into my bones as she approached, her intent clear. "You should not have come here," she hissed, her voice echoing eerily within the confines of the chamber. I resolved to stand my ground, or at least I attempted to muster the courage necessary to do so. The fear coursing through my veins urged me to submit to her will, but I refused to become a victim. "I will not fall to you," I asserted, though my voice quivered as uncertainty seeped through my bravado. With a bone-chilling shriek that pierced the silence like a dagger, the witch lunged at me. Instinct took over as I dodged away, the mirrors shattering into a million shards, each piece reflecting a reality painted with my deepest anxieties and fears. I raced away, the echoes of her laughter haunting me as I navigated the maze, desperate to escape before she enveloped me entirely in her dark embrace. Time crawled as I moved through the treacherous pathways, every turn becoming a perilous gamble against death itself. But then, as if the very walls conspired against me, they shifted, enclosing me deeper within the labyrinthine structure. The exit I had desperately hoped to find melted away, turning into nothing more than a cruel mirage, leaving me trapped within the witch's clutches. I could hear her whispers rise and fall behind me, coaxing me to surrender myself to the madness that enveloped this place. Just when hope seemed utterly lost, I stumbled across a hidden exit, illuminated by an eerie glow that beckoned me with promises of freedom. Without a moment of hesitation, I surged through, bursting into the crisp night air outside the maze. It felt like a rebirth, each breath filling my lungs laden with the heavy knowledge of the horrors I had just endured. Yet, even in my escape, freedom came at an unforgiving price. I could still feel the traces of the Pale Witch's influence clawing at my consciousness, leaving an indelible mark of darkness that lingered uneasily in my heart. As I began my long journey back toward the comforting light, I knew that the haunted memories of Flagdon Swamp and the dread of Coetus would forever haunt my dreams, lurking in the dark corners of my mind. The abyss had left its mark on me, transforming me into a mere shadow of my former self. Each rustle of the night, Every whisper that danced on the wind reverberated with the echoes of my trials and tribulations, reminding me how close I had come to eternal darkness. Though I escaped the vile clutches of the abyss, I would never truly escape its legacy, a stark reminder that even in survival, the darkness can linger ominously, waiting patiently for the next moment of weakness to reclaim its lost soul. I walked away, but deep down, I knew I would carry the abyss within me forever, a battle-scarred survivor navigating a world that had, for a brief moment, mirrored the very depths of hell itself. The shadows of anguish would chase me relentlessly, an ever-present specter that reminded me that survival in the abyss can be as tormenting as facing the abyss itself, a fateful cycle of nightmare and endurance from which there is no true escape. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was the autumn of 1810 when my family and I first arrived in the small, isolated town of Eldridge. Nestled against the edge of the vast and ominous Blackwood forest, the town was shrouded in a thick veil of superstition and fear. The townsfolk whispered about the forest, claiming it was cursed, haunted by malevolent spirits that preyed on the unsuspecting and the unwary. As a young boy, I had always been fascinated by tales of the supernatural, enchanted by stories of ghosts and demons told around flickering campfires. But nothing could have prepared me for the horrors that awaited us in this forsaken place. Our journey had been long and arduous, filled with the kind of hardships that tested our resolve. My parents were eager to settle into our new home, hoping to build a life away from the chaos of the city. They had purchased a modest cabin at the forest's edge, a place that was both beautiful and foreboding. The trees loomed like ancient guardians, their gnarled branches twisting toward the sky, as if to warn us to turn back and abandon our plans. But we were determined to make a life here, despite the ominous warnings from the townsfolk, who spoke in hushed tones of the dangers lurking within the woods. The first few weeks were uneventful, filled with the excitement of exploration. My sister, Clara, and I spent our days wandering the forest, marveling at its beauty while our parents tended to the cabin, fixing it up to make it comfortable. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched beneath our feet, painting the ground in vibrant hues of red and gold. However, as the days grew shorter and the nights longer, an unsettling sense of dread began to creep into our lives, a feeling that something was not quite right in this seemingly idyllic setting. It started with strange sounds echoing through the woods at night, whispers carried by the wind, rustling leaves, and distant howls that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to dismiss them as mere figments of my imagination, tricks played by the shadows that danced in the flickering light of our fire. But Clara was not so easily convinced. She often spoke of shadows that moved just beyond our sight and eyes that seemed to watch us from the darkness, lurking just out of reach. Her fear was palpable, and it seeped into our home like a slow poison. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep indigo, we sat around the fireplace, our faces illuminated by the flickering flames. My father, a man of reason and logic, attempted to calm our fears with rational explanations. "The forest is simply teeming with wildlife," he said, dismissing our concerns. "There's nothing to fear, it's just the sounds of nature." But my mother, her face pale and drawn, spoke of a different kind of fear. "The townspeople warned us, Henry. They spoke of a demon that roams these woods, claiming the souls of those who wander too far." Her voice trembled, and I could see the fear in her eyes, a reflection of the darkness that was slowly creeping into our lives. Despite their conflicting views, the tension in our home grew palpable, thickening the air until it felt suffocating. Clara and I began to notice changes in our surroundings. The air felt heavier, almost oppressive, and the forest seemed to close in around us, suffocating us with its presence. One night, as I lay in bed, Clara awoke me, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you hear that?" I strained to listen, my heart racing as I heard it, a low growl, deep and resonant, echoing through the trees. I could feel the weight of something watching us, lurking just beyond the firelight, its presence a dark shadow that loomed over our fragile existence. We huddled together, too terrified to call for our parents, the fear binding us in a shared silence. As the days turned into weeks, the disappearances began. One by one, the townsfolk vanished without a trace, leaving behind only confusion and despair. First, it was old Mr. Thompson, who had ventured into the woods to gather firewood and never returned. Then, the Miller family, who had gone hunting and never came back. The town was gripped by panic, and whispers of the demon grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the remaining population. The atmosphere in our cabin became suffocating, thick with unspoken fears and the weight of dread. My parents argued frequently, my father's rationality clashing violently with my mother's growing fear. Clara and I tried to stay out of their way, but the tension was inescapable, wrapping around us like a noose. One night, I overheard my mother sobbing in the dark, her voice choked with fear. What if it comes for us next? I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I felt the same dread gnawing at my insides. It was only a matter of time before the demon would come for us, and I could sense it drawing closer with each passing day. Then, one fateful night, it happened. A storm raged outside, the wind howling like a banshee, rattling the windows and shaking the very foundation of our home. I lay in bed, unable to sleep, when I heard a loud crash outside, followed by a series of ominous sounds that sent my heart racing. My heart raced as I crept to the window, peering into the darkness. Lightning illuminated the trees, revealing a figure standing just beyond the tree line. It was tall and gaunt, its skin a sickly gray, and its eyes glowed like embers in the night, burning with a malevolent hunger. I stumbled back, fear coursing through my veins like ice. I rushed to Clara's side, shaking her awake with urgency. "Clara! Wake up! There's something out there!" She groaned, rubbing her eyes, but I could see the fear creeping into her expression as she realized my panic. "What is it?" I pointed toward the window, but the figure was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The storm continued to rage outside, and I could hear my parents arguing in the other room, their voices rising in a frantic pitch. I felt a sense of urgency, a primal need to protect my sister. "We need to get out of here," I whispered, my voice trembling. But before we could move, the door burst open, and my father stumbled in, his face pale and covered in mud, his eyes wide with terror. "Get away from the windows," he shouted, his voice a raw edge of panic. "We need to barricade the door." My mother followed closely behind, her eyes wide with terror. "It's here! I saw it!" We scrambled to obey, pushing furniture against the door as the storm raged outside, the wind howling like a creature in agony. The trees groaned, their branches scratching against the cabin as if trying to claw their way inside. I could hear the whispers again, growing louder, more insistent, as if the forest itself was alive, calling to us, beckoning us to join the darkness that lurked just beyond our fragile sanctuary. Hours passed, and the storm finally began to subside, but the tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. My father paced back and forth, his hands trembling with fear and desperation. "We need to leave this place," he said, his voice a low growl of urgency. "We can't stay here any longer." But my mother shook her head, tears streaming down her face, her voice filled with despair. "Where will we go? The town is just as dangerous. We can't outrun it. It will find us wherever we go." That night, we huddled together in the living room, the fire crackling softly as we tried to find comfort in each other's presence. But sleep eluded us, slipping through our fingers like grains of sand. The forest was alive with sounds, branches snapping, whispers in the wind. and that low growl that seemed to echo in the distance, a constant reminder of the terror that lurked just beyond our walls. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the windows, we made a decision. We would leave the cabin and head to the town, seeking help from the remaining townsfolk. With heavy hearts, we packed what little belongings we could carry, our movements slow and deliberate as if we were preparing for a funeral. We stepped outside into the damp morning air, the forest looming before us, its shadows stretching like fingers, reaching for us, as if to pull us back into its dark embrace. As we walked, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a weight that pressed down on my chest. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches scratching at our skin like the claws of some unseen beast, a reminder of the danger that lurked within the depths of Blackwood forest. We reached the town, but it was eerily quiet. The streets were empty, and the buildings stood like tombstones, silent witnesses to the horrors that had unfolded in the night. We hurried to the town hall, hoping to find someone, anyone, who could help us. But the hall was empty, save for the remnants of hastily abandoned belongings, a testament to the panic that had gripped the town. It was clear that the town had been deserted, its inhabitants fleeing from the terror that had claimed so many lives. My heart sank as I realized we were truly alone, lost in a world that had turned its back on us. Desperate, we returned to the cabin, hoping to find safety within its walls, a sanctuary from the chaos outside. But as we approached, I felt a chill run down my spine, an icy finger tracing the length of my spine. The door stood ajar, swinging gently in the breeze, a silent invitation to the horrors that awaited us inside. My father stepped forward cautiously, pushing the door open with a trembling hand. Inside, the cabin was a wreck. Furniture lay overturned, scattered like fallen soldiers, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding, heavy with the weight of what had transpired. "Stay close," my father warned, his voice barely above a whisper, a fragile thread of fear woven into his words. We moved through the cabin, searching for any sign of life, but it was as if the forest had swallowed everything whole, leaving nothing but echoes of our past. Just as despair began to settle in, Clara gasped, pointing toward the back door, her eyes wide with terror. "Look!" There, standing in the doorway, was the figure from the night before. It was even more terrifying in the light of day, its features twisted and grotesque, a mockery of humanity. Its eyes burned with an otherworldly fire, and its mouth stretched into a sinister grin that sent a wave of nausea through me. I felt paralyzed with fear as it stepped into the cabin, its presence suffocating, wrapping around us like a shroud. My father reached for a nearby axe, but before he could react, the demon lunged forward, moving with a speed that defied belief. I screamed as it grabbed my mother, dragging her into the darkness, her cries echoing in my ears. "Ron!" my father shouted, his voice a desperate plea, but I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, watching as the demon disappeared into the forest, taking my mother with it, leaving nothing but a void where her warmth had been. In that moment, something inside me shattered, a fragile glass breaking into a million pieces. I finally broke free from my paralysis and grabbed Clara's hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against mine. We bolted from the cabin, sprinting into the woods, our hearts pounding in our chests like war drums. We could hear the demon's growl echoing behind us, a chilling reminder of the horror that had claimed our family, urging us to flee deeper into the forest. We ran for what felt like hours, the forest closing in around us, branches clawing at our skin, tearing at our clothes. Just when I thought we would be lost forever, we stumbled upon a clearing bathed in sunlight, a stark contrast to the darkness that surrounded us. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, covered in strange markings that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. Clara and I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, our bodies trembling with fear and exhaustion. "What do we do?" she cried, tears streaming down her face, her voice breaking under the weight of our terror. I looked around, desperate for an answer, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of our situation. The markings on the altar seemed to pulse with energy, almost calling to us, and I felt a strange compulsion to approach it, a sense that it held the key to our survival. "Maybe it can help us," I said, pulling Clara to her feet, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around us. As we reached the altar, the whispers returned, swirling around us like a tempest, a cacophony of voices that filled the air with dread. I could feel the presence of the demon closing in, its breath hot on our necks, a reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond our reach. We placed our hands on the altar, and in that moment, a surge of energy coursed through us, a warmth that pushed back against the cold. The forest erupted with a deafening roar as the demon emerged from the shadows, its eyes locked onto us with a hunger that sent chills down my spine, a primal instinct to flee screaming in my mind. But we stood our ground, fueled by a newfound strength that surged through our veins, a determination to fight back against the darkness. The energy from the altar enveloped us, forming a barrier between us and the demon, a protective cocoon that shimmered with power. It howled in rage, its form flickering like a flame as it slammed against the invisible wall, its twisted features contorting in fury. With every ounce of willpower, I focused on the markings, chanting the words that seemed to echo in my mind, ancient and powerful. The demon lunged forward, but the barrier held strong, refusing to yield. It slammed against the invisible wall, its form twisting and contorting as it screamed in fury, a sound that reverberated through the forest. Clara and I pressed our hands harder against the altar, feeling the energy grow stronger, pulsing with a life of its own. With one final push, the barrier exploded outward, engulfing the demon in a blinding light that illuminated the entire clearing. It howled one last time, a sound filled with rage and despair, before vanishing into the shadows, leaving nothing but silence in its wake, a stillness that felt like a breath held for too long. We collapsed to the ground, our bodies trembling with exhaustion, the adrenaline fading as reality crashed back in. The forest around us felt different, lighter somehow, as if the weight of the darkness had been lifted. The whispers had faded, replaced by a serene stillness that enveloped us like a warm embrace. As we sat there, I realized that we had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. Our family was gone, and the town we had hoped to call home was lost to the shadows, a distant memory of a life that once was. But we were alive, and in that moment, I vowed to honor my parents' memory by facing whatever came next with courage, refusing to let their sacrifice be in vain. Clara and I made our way back through the forest, hand in hand, ready to face an uncertain future. The haunting of Blackwood Forest would never truly leave us, but we had found strength in each other, a bond forged in the fires of fear and loss. Together, we would forge a new path in the light, determined to reclaim our lives from the darkness that had threatened to consume us. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I've always had a thirst for adventure, and my brother's bravery never ceased to amaze me. That day, we packed our gear, ready for a cave diving expedition that promised to be unlike any other. I knew this wasn't going to be just any dive. We were set to explore a legendary underwater cave shrouded in mystery and tales of the unknown. As our dive boat glided smoothly into the azure sea, my heart raced with a mix of excitement and unease, feeling both exhilarated and apprehensive about what awaited us beneath the surface. Even though we weren't professional divers, I agreed to my brother's enthusiastic proposal after his relentless encouragement and infectious excitement. He confidently claimed we would surely discover some bizarre, uncharted creatures that would leave us in awe. So, we donned our masks, secured our gear, turned on our oxygen tanks, and plunged into the water, ready to embrace whatever wonders lay beneath. The water was icy, sending a shiver down my spine, and the current was gentle, cradling us as we descended. Sunlight filtered through the surface in a mesmerizing dance of shadows, illuminating the vibrant marine life swimming around us. I looked down at the various creatures, each more fascinating than the last, and my initial fear began to morph into curiosity and wonder. However, as we ventured deeper into the cave, the surroundings started to take on an eerie, mysterious quality that sent a chill down my spine. We swam into a large opening, the size of which was astounding, and immediately entered a narrow passage that seemed to beckon us further into the depths. The walls glimmered with a dangerous sheen, as if warning us not to go any further, but my brother seemed completely caught up in the thrill of exploration, determined to dive deeper into the unknown. Although my instincts screamed at me to turn back, I felt an inexplicable pull to follow him, even as fear gnawed at my insides. In the cramped tunnel, we encountered all sorts of strange creatures that seemed to thrive in the darkness. The flickering shapes of jellyfish glided by gracefully, their luminescence reminiscent of the ghosts from legends and folklore. A wave of inexplicable fear washed over me, and as I tried to turn back, my brother held me firm, his grip reassuring yet firm. His excitement made him fearless in the face of those bizarre creatures, while I was haunted by the unknown abyss that lay ahead, each shadow seeming to grow darker and more foreboding. As we delved deeper into the cave, the darkness thickened around us, enveloping us in an almost palpable shroud. I started to feel a gnawing unease, as if the water around me was pressing down, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, my brother stopped ahead, pointing to a dark corner with a wild gleam in his eyes, his expression a mix of excitement and curiosity. His voice was low, almost as if he were being drawn by some mysterious force. "Let's check that out." The thrill in his voice sent a shiver of both excitement and dread through me. He swam toward the darkness, and my heart began to race uncontrollably. Just as I was struggling with whether to follow him or turn back, I noticed that the passage behind me seemed to blur and fade, as if the cave itself was shifting around us. A terrifying feeling surged through me, leaving me with a sense of helpless, desperate loneliness that threatened to overwhelm my senses. "Brother!" I shouted, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. All I heard in response was the cold rush of water and the encroaching darkness that surrounded me. I fought to stay calm, trying to retrace my steps, but I was already lost in this unfamiliar waterway, the path ahead becoming increasingly obscure. At that moment, strange sounds echoed from the surface, as if some enormous creature was approaching, its presence felt even before it was seen. My face went pale, and a wave of intense fear washed over me, paralyzing me momentarily. I realized I had to find my brother if I ever hoped to escape this eerie cave, which now felt like a living entity intent on swallowing us whole. I desperately tried to call his name, but my throat felt constricted, and no sound came out, only silence and the echoing rush of water. My oxygen gauge was dropping lower by the second, and time was slipping away mercilessly, each moment stretching into an eternity. The light around me grew dimmer, as if something was closing in, and I could feel the weight of the darkness pressing against me. I searched every dark corner, my despair deepening with each passing moment, the shadows seeming to mock my efforts. Just when I was on the brink of giving up, I spotted a vague figure in the shadows up ahead. It was my brother. I swam toward him with all my might, hope reigniting in my chest, a flicker of light in the overwhelming darkness. But as I got closer, the sight before me twisted my heart in anguish. His face was filled with terror, his body struggling helplessly in the dark, as if bound by an unseen force that held him captive. I reached out in panic, but he began to fade away into the shadows, swallowed up like a tide receding from the shore. "Quick, come with me!" I heard his voice echoing in the darkness, filled with urgency, as if it were coming from the depths of the abyss itself. But when I tried to touch him, he vanished, as if he had never existed, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness. I clenched my teeth in despair, fear clinging to me like a shadow that refused to let go. I kept swimming, feeling my oxygen running out and my consciousness slipping away, each stroke becoming more labored. Just as I was about to suffocate, I spotted a faint light ahead, the hope I had almost given up on shining like a beacon. I summoned every last bit of strength to swim toward that light, driven by some deep instinct, pushing forward with all my might, determined to escape the clutches of the abyss. Finally, a warm beam of light broke through the darkness, illuminating the water around me. I felt the blinding brightness as I fought my way to the surface, gasping for air until I was too exhausted to stay afloat. In that moment, I realized how precious life is, and I was determined not to sink any further into the depths of despair. I floated on the surface, utterly drained, my body aching from the struggle. My brother's voice echoed in my ears, filled with helplessness and loss, a haunting reminder of what I had almost lost. I tried to call out to him, promising that we would reunite, but no matter what I did, I couldn't turn back, the distance between us growing ever wider. As time passed, I finally began to calm down, reflecting on the endless depths and mysteries that lay beneath the surface. Although this dive had filled me with fear, it also made me realize that there are still many unexplored realms on Earth waiting for us to uncover their secrets. This mysterious deep sea continues to beckon fearless adventurers, and I would carry with me a sense of awe and contemplation as I moved forward on my journey, forever changed by the experience. Once more, I looked back at the water, filled with nostalgia for the past and hopes for the future. Deep within the cave was my brother, the fears I couldn't overcome, and the unknown I had yet to reach, a reminder of the fragility of life and the bonds that tie us together. No matter what lay ahead, I would always remember that heart-stopping dive, my brother's figure, and the endless dark abyss that had tested my very limits. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. When I first stepped into the sterile white halls of St. Jude's Hospital, I thought I was prepared for anything that might come my way. After all, I had spent years training to be a psychiatric nurse, diving deep into the intricacies of the human mind and learning how to navigate the complex emotional landscapes of my patients. But nothing could have truly prepared me for the profound impact that Charlie would have on my life. Charlie was a patient who had been admitted after a particularly brutal episode of self-harm. Her wrists bore the scars of her struggles, a painful map that told a story I could only begin to fathom. The moment I laid eyes on her, sitting alone in her small, dimly lit room, the shadows of her past seemed to cling to her like a second skin, enveloping her in a shroud of sorrow. I felt an inexplicable pull towards her, as if her loneliness reached out to me, wrapping around my heart and squeezing until I could hardly breathe. I approached her cautiously, acutely aware that any sudden movement could send her retreating back into her shell, further away from the possibility of connection. "Hi, I'm Theo," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside me. "I'm here to help you, if you'll let me." Her gaze flickered up to meet mine, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the person she used to be, before the pain, before the isolation had taken root in her life. But just as quickly as that spark ignited, it faded, replaced by a wall of indifference that seemed to shield her from the world. "Help? You don't even know me," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper, laced with skepticism and hurt. Over the following weeks, I found myself drawn to Charlie in ways I never expected, as if she were a magnet pulling me closer despite the risks involved. Each day, I would sit with her, sharing stories and listening intently to her thoughts and feelings. She spoke of her life before the hospital, a life filled with laughter, friends, and moments of joy, now reduced to mere fragments of memory that haunted her. I listened, captivated by her vulnerability, and slowly, she began to open up, revealing the depths of her struggles and the darkness that clouded her mind. But with each revelation she shared, I felt the weight of her sorrow pressing down on me, a heavy burden that threatened to crush my spirit. Charlie's emotions were like a storm, unpredictable, fierce, and often overwhelming. One moment she would be laughing, her eyes sparkling with mischief and life, and the next, she would retreat into a dark silence, her expression vacant and lost, as if she had vanished into a void. I felt helpless, a bystander in a battle I couldn't fight for her, a spectator watching her suffer from the sidelines. One evening, as I sat on the edge of her bed, I noticed the way her fingers traced the scars on her wrists, a gesture both tender and painful, a silent testament to her internal struggle. "Why do you hurt yourself, Charlie?" I asked, my heart aching at the sight of her fingers dancing over the remnants of her pain. She looked up at me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope. "It's the only way I know how to feel," she admitted, her voice trembling with vulnerability. "When the pain is physical, it's easier to manage than the hurt inside, the emotional turmoil that never seems to fade." I wanted to reach out, to hold her and tell her that she didn't have to bear this burden alone, that there was a way out of the darkness. But I was afraid of crossing a line that could shatter the fragile connection we had built. Instead, I offered her my presence, my unwavering support, hoping it would be enough to guide her through her darkest moments. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself becoming increasingly entangled in her world, unable to separate my own emotions from hers. I began to lose track of time, the hours spent with Charlie becoming the highlight of my days, the only moments that felt meaningful. Yet, with each passing moment, I felt the shadows of her despair creeping closer, threatening to engulf me in their darkness. I was becoming too invested, too attached, and the realization terrified me, leaving me feeling vulnerable and exposed. Then came the day when Charlie vanished without a trace. I arrived at the hospital, my heart light with anticipation, eager to see her and continue our conversations, only to be met with a chilling emptiness. Her room was bare, the bed neatly made, as if she had never been there at all. Panic surged through me, a tidal wave of confusion and fear. I rushed to the nurse's station, my voice rising in urgency as I asked, "Where's Charlie?" "She was here yesterday." One of the nurses looked up, her expression somber and filled with concern. "Theo, I'm sorry. She was discharged last night. Her family came to take her home," she explained, her tone heavy with the weight of the news. I felt the ground shift beneath me, a sense of loss washing over me like a tidal wave crashing against the shore. I had been so focused on trying to help her that I hadn't even considered the possibility of her leaving, of stepping back into a world that had been so unkind to her. My heart raced as I envisioned her stepping back into the world, unprepared and fragile, like a butterfly released from a cocoon too soon, without the strength to navigate the dangers that lay ahead. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in my chest, a gnawing anxiety that refused to let go. I searched for her, scouring social media and reaching out to mutual acquaintances, desperate for any sign of her existence, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. The silence was deafening, and with each passing day, I felt my hope dwindling, replaced by a growing sense of despair. Then, one fateful evening, I received a call that shattered my world into a million pieces. "Is this Theo?" "I'm calling from the police department. We found a body." The words echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain that replayed over and over, drowning out everything else. I felt my heart stop as the officer continued, detailing the circumstances surrounding the discovery. Charlie had been found in a nearby park, her life extinguished in the quiet of the night, leaving behind nothing but pain and unanswered questions. My hands trembled as I listened, the weight of her pain crashing down on me like a relentless tide, pulling me under into a sea of sorrow. In the days that followed, I spiraled into a darkness I had never known, a chasm of grief that threatened to swallow me whole. Guilt gnawed at my insides, a relentless whisper that I could have done more, that I should have saved her from this fate. I replayed every conversation we had, every moment I could have intervened, hoping to find some semblance of solace in my memories. But it was futile. I was left with nothing but the echoes of her laughter, the shadows of her sorrow, and the haunting knowledge that I had failed her in the most profound way possible. In the depths of my despair, I began to realize that Charlie's struggle was not just hers alone. I, too, was trapped in a cycle of loneliness and pain, a reflection of her own torment. The connection we had forged was a double-edged sword, binding us together in our shared suffering. I had tried to save her, but in doing so, I had unwittingly exposed my own vulnerabilities, revealing the cracks in my own carefully constructed facade. As I stood at her memorial, surrounded by the flickering candles and the soft whispers of those who loved her, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. I had lost a patient, a friend, and a part of myself in the process. The weight of her absence settled heavily on my shoulders, a constant reminder that life is fragile and fleeting, and that we often take for granted the moments we have with those we care about. In the months that followed, I sought therapy, desperate to make sense of the chaos that had consumed me. I spoke of Charlie, of her pain and my own, and slowly, I began to understand the importance of connection and healing. I learned that it was okay to feel vulnerable, that sharing my own struggles could create a bridge for others to cross, a path to understanding and empathy. Charlie's memory became a catalyst for change in my life, igniting a fire within me to advocate for those who felt lost and alone. I dedicated myself to helping others, using my experiences to guide those who found themselves in the depths of despair. I spoke openly about mental health, breaking the silence that often shrouded it in darkness, encouraging others to share their stories and seek help. Though the pain of losing Charlie would never fully fade, I found a sense of purpose in my grief, a reason to keep moving forward. I realized that she had not only touched my life, but had also ignited a passion within me to be a voice for the voiceless, to stand up for those who felt unheard and unseen. I carried her memory with me, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is hope for healing and connection, a light that can guide us through the shadows. As I walked through the halls of St. Jude's once more, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a quiet acceptance of my journey. The echoes of solitude still lingered, but they no longer held me captive. I was no longer just a bystander in the lives of others. I was a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the depths of despair, we are never truly alone. And in that realization, I found the strength to continue, to honor Charlie's memory by helping others find their way back to the light. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. I never anticipated that my routine history lecture would take a turn towards the macabre, plunging me into a realm of terror that I had never before experienced. As a junior studying history at Maplewood University, I had always been fascinated by the various epochs that shaped our world, from the rise and fall of empires to the intricate tapestry of human events that defined our existence. But that fateful Wednesday afternoon, I found myself enmeshed in something far darker than any text could convey, an experience that would haunt my thoughts long after the clock struck 5 and the sun dipped below the horizon. The old lecture hall, with its high ceilings and worn wooden desks, exuded an air of antiquity that was both charming and unsettling. Dust motes danced in the light that filtered through the stained glass, creating an eerie atmosphere that felt almost alive. As I took my usual seat in the back row, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The students around me were unusually quiet, their faces blank canvases devoid of expression, as if they were mere shells of their former selves. A shiver ran down my spine, but I dismissed it as mere nerves, attributing it to the heavy subject matter we were about to delve into. Our lecturer, Dr. Samuel Graves, entered the room wearing a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. He looked strikingly out of place, his attire contrasting sharply with the usual casualness of academia, where jeans and hoodies were the norm. There was an unsettling air about him, his eyes, dark and penetrating, seemed to hold secrets that were meant to be buried deep within the annals of history. As he approached the podium, a wave of silence washed over us, each of us immobilized by an unseen force that seemed to emanate from him. It was as if the very atmosphere had thickened, wrapping around us like a shroud. Today, we will delve into the darker aspects of human history, he began, his voice smooth yet chilling, sending a ripple of unease through the room. The Second World War was not just a conflict of nations. It unleashed horrors that mankind had never known, horrors that continue to echo through time. He spoke of battles and bravery, but as he continued, his tone shifted, darkening with each word. The tales he spun morphed into eerie accounts of the Hell Brigade, horrific soldiers who reportedly poured into towns and villages, leaving nothing but desolation in their wake, their presence a harbinger of doom. My heart raced as I listened intently, captivated yet terrified. The description of soldiers with eyes like voids and voices like thunder echoed in my mind, resonating with a terror I couldn't articulate. My classmates seemed enraptured, nodding in grim acknowledgement, their faces illuminated by the dim light that flickered overhead. It was as if we were all caught in some hypnotic trance, driven to confront evils that should have remained buried in the past, evils that were clawing their way back into our reality. As the lecture progressed, the air grew dense, and I felt an overwhelming weight pressing on my chest, as if the very room were conspiring against me. Dr. Graves detailed the atrocities committed during the war with a glee that sent chills through me, a morbid fascination that seemed to thrill him. He spoke of people thrown into pits, of screams swallowed by the void, and dread gripped my gut like a vice. I shifted in my seat, longing to escape the suffocating atmosphere, yet I was paralyzed by an unseen force that held me captive. I felt as if I were being drawn deeper into a nightmare from which I could not wake, the boundaries of reality blurring with each horrific detail he unveiled. Then came the moment that shattered my composure, ripping me from my stupor. Dr. Graves' voice dropped to a whisper, his words laced with sinister intent that sent shivers cascading down my spine. What if I told you that the Hell Brigade did not end with the war? What if they are still among us, just waiting for the darkness to claim our souls? His gaze locked with mine, and for a split second, I thought I saw the flicker of something terrible in his eyes, an abyss of despair that threatened to swallow me whole. It was a glimpse into a void where sanity could not dwell, a harrowing invitation to confront the darkest corners of human history. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct urging me to flee. I bolted from my seat, knocking over my desk in the process, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the oppressive silence. The cold air rushed over me as I attempted to escape, but the door seemed impossibly far, a distant promise of freedom that I could not reach. The room felt like it was closing in, and the faces of my classmates morphed into grotesque masks of fear and delight, their expressions twisted into a macabre dance of horror. They were enjoying this. They were feeding off this palpable dread, their eyes glinting with a dark satisfaction that made my skin crawl. No matter how fast I ran, I could not escape the lecture hall's grasp, the walls closing in around me like a vice. Dr. Graves continued his monologue, a persistent hum in my ears that drowned out my thoughts. I stumbled into the aisle, desperate to reach the exit, but with every step I took, it felt as though the universe conspired to keep me trapped in this surreal nightmare, a labyrinth of terror that had no end. The shadows lengthened, creeping along the floor as if they had a life of their own, eager to ensnare me in their chilling embrace. Then, just as I neared the door, the lights flickered, plunging the room into a chasm of darkness. For a few harrowing seconds, I felt weightless, as if the ground beneath me had vanished entirely. And then, just as abruptly, light returned, but it was a grotesque parody of illumination, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls that writhed and twisted like living entities. Within those shadows, I could see figures emerging, dressed in tattered uniforms reminiscent of the era we studied, their faces devoid of humanity and filled with haunting sorrow, their eyes hollow and lifeless. These were not mere illusions. They were the vestiges of the past that Dr. Graves had conjured, and they moved with a deliberate malevolence that sent my heart racing. My pulse quickened as the realization hit me. I was trapped in a dimension where history bled into reality, where the horrors of the past had come to reclaim their victims. I had crossed a barrier that separated our world from theirs, and now I was a part of their story, entwined in the very fabric of their suffering. The classroom filled with the hushed whispers of ghostly soldiers recounting their final moments, each tale a thread in the tapestry of despair that enveloped me, wrapping tighter around my throat. The air thickened with a rancid odor, the scent of decay and anguish rising to greet me like an unwelcome specter. I stumbled backward, wanting to scream, but no sound escaped my lips, trapped in a prison of fear. The walls closed in around me, and the temperature dropped to a bone-chilling degree, each breath I took feeling like a struggle against an unseen force. In a moment of sheer terror, I turned to flee once more, but the exit had vanished, replaced by an impenetrable wall of darkness. The walls twisted like serpents, and the floor pulsed beneath me as if it were alive, grasping at my ankles to pull me down into the abyss of despair. I gasped for air, fighting against the internal chaos that threatened to consume me, drowning in a tide of shadow and sorrow, surrounded by the memories of countless souls who had faced the horrors of war and were now trapped in this liminal space. Dr. Graves' voice echoed through the hall, distorted and reverberating against the walls like a death knell. "You wanted to know the past, didn't you? Now you will live it." At that moment, a shrill scream pierced through the air, and I recognized it as my own, a desperate cry for help that seemed to dissolve into the oppressive silence. The darkness clawed at my mind, revealing images of destruction and despair, bodies strewn across battlefields, the last breaths of those who had suffered unspeakable horrors. I was no longer just a student, I was a participant in this grim tableau, and with every heartbeat, reality twisted further away, spiraling into a vortex of despair and hopelessness. I struggled against the tide, feeling my resolve weaken as I succumbed to the overwhelming fear that threatened to engulf me. It felt as if I were being pulled into a maelstrom of despair, the shadows wrapping around me like a shroud, suffocating my spirit. But just when I thought I would be lost forever in this spectral nightmare, a flicker of memory ignited within me, something my grandmother once told me: the past can only hold power over you if you allow it. With that thought anchored in my mind, I summoned every ounce of strength I had left, every fragment of will that remained. "Enough!" I screamed, pouring all my desperation and defiance into those words. The shadows wavered, recoiling from the resonance of my voice, as if my determination had pierced through their veil of darkness. The ghostly soldiers hesitated, their expressions twisting in confusion, caught off guard by my unexpected resistance. I pressed on, recounting the stories of those who had survived, those who had risen from the ashes of destruction, their resilience a beacon of hope amidst the despair. My voice grew stronger, resonating with hope and defiance, a rallying cry against the encroaching darkness. Slowly, the oppressive weight in the room began to lift, the figures retreating into the shadows, their power waning in the face of my resolve. The walls of the lecture hall shimmered, and I felt a sensation akin to being unshackled from a heavy burden, the chains of fear falling away. I had fought back against the darkness, refusing to be consumed by the horrors of the past that sought to claim me. As suddenly as it had begun, the lecture hall returned to normal, the familiar surroundings bringing me a sense of relief that washed over me like a balm. I found myself standing by the door, breathless and shaken but alive, the remnants of my ordeal still echoing in my mind. The students were gone, and the room was empty save for me and Dr. Graves, who stood at the front of the class, his demeanor oddly calm, as if he had anticipated this outcome all along. He regarded me with a knowing smile that sent chills down my spine, as if he had expected my resistance all along, a predator pleased with the struggle of its prey. "You think you can escape the past so easily? The Hell Brigade will always be lurking, just beneath the surface." His voice dripped with malevolence, and in that moment, I realized my battle wasn't over. It was merely the beginning of a new chapter in a story that had yet to unfold. I stepped into the hallway, shaken but resolute, my heart pounding in my chest. The experience had shifted something within me. I would no longer be just an observer of history, but an active participant, one who would remember, learn, and bear witness to the stories that needed to be told. The past might seek to haunt me, but I would stand firm, prepared to confront any darkness that dared to disturb my reality again. As I walked away from the lecture hall, I glanced back only once, finding the door standing ajar, whispering secrets of an eternal struggle that would never truly end. And though I would carry the weight of that dark experience with me, I knew I would not allow it to define who I was. The Hell Brigade had risen, but so had I, ready to face whatever shadows awaited me in the depths of history. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. It was on that frigid winter day when the world outside transformed into a realm of white and silence, a scene that would haunt me forever. The air was thick with the promise of an impending blizzard, and the wind howled mournfully, as if trying to warn us of the darkness that would soon envelop our lives. I remember that day vividly, perhaps because it was the last time I saw my friends, and the memories are etched into my mind like a chilling nightmare that refuses to fade. As the bus rattled along the familiar route, my heart sank lower with every passing moment. The sky, once a soft gray, now loomed ominously, an oppressive blanket threatening to swallow us whole. The driver, a gruff man with a permanent scowl etched on his face, muttered something about the weather worsening, and I could sense the unease creeping through the rows of seats like a creeping vine. We were children, carefree and oblivious to the chill that seeped into our bones, but even we could feel the shift in the atmosphere, an unsettling tension hanging in the air. I sat beside my best friend, Sarah, who always had a way of making me laugh, even in the darkest moments. We giggled and whispered secrets, our laughter a fragile shield against the growing dread that surrounded us. The bus was filled with the sounds of chatter and playful banter, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety that unsettled me, a feeling that something was terribly wrong. We were just a few minutes away from home when the bus came to an abrupt halt, jolting us from our momentary bliss. The driver peered through the front windshield, squinting against the swirling snow that began to obscure our view. "Sit tight, kids," he said, his voice laced with tension that sent a ripple of fear through us. "Looks like we might be stuck for a while." The words hung in the air, heavy with an unspoken dread. The minutes stretched on like hours as the snow piled higher, obscuring our path and trapping us in this metal cocoon. I looked around at the anxious faces of my classmates. They fidgeted in their seats, uncertainty casting a pall over the once lively atmosphere. I could feel fear beginning to creep in, gnawing at my insides like a hungry rat, its claws digging deeper as the realization of our predicament settled in. Then, just as I was about to voice my discomfort, a figure appeared outside the bus. Tall and shrouded in a long, dark coat, he loomed against the white background of the storm, a shadow among shadows. The wind howled like a banshee, and the snow swirled around him, creating an ethereal aura that sent a shiver down my spine. My breath caught in my throat as I strained to see his face, but the storm swallowed his features whole, leaving only an unsettling silhouette. "It's just the snow," I told myself, desperately trying to rationalize the tightening in my chest, but deep down, I knew there was something utterly wrong. The figure moved closer, and the bus fell into an uneasy silence, the laughter that had filled the air moments before snuffed out, extinguished like a candle in a gale. The driver's voice broke the silence, but it did little to calm the rising panic. "Everyone, stay calm," he instructed, but I could hear the tremor in his tone, the fear lurking just beneath the surface. I glanced at Sarah, who looked as terrified as I felt, her wide eyes reflecting my own dread. The figure raised a hand, almost as if beckoning, and a chill ran down my spine, settling deep in my bones. Something compelled me to look away, to focus on anything but the looming figure, but curiosity held me captive. I turned back just in time to see him disappear from view, and then chaos erupted in a way that I could never have anticipated. The bus lurched violently, and the lights flickered ominously, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat. A piercing shriek sliced through the air, and I felt panic seize my heart, a cold grip that threatened to crush me. Children began to cry, the sound echoing in the cramped space like a dirge, a mournful melody that filled me with dread. I grabbed Sarah's hand tightly, and she squeezed back, her grip a lifeline in the tempest of fear that threatened to drown us. Moments melted into each other as we huddled together, the shadows in the bus growing darker, more oppressive. I tried to comfort my friends, to tell them everything would be okay, but uncertainty gnawed at me, consuming my thoughts. The next thing I remember was a blinding flash of light, and then darkness enveloped me, swallowing my consciousness whole. When I regained consciousness, the world was eerily still, as if time itself had frozen. The soft crunch of the snow outside was the only sound that filled my ears, a haunting reminder of the chaos that had just unfolded. I blinked my eyes open, disoriented and confused, struggling to piece together what had happened. I was still in the bus, but the others were gone. My heart raced as I called out their names, my voice echoing in the hollow shell of the vehicle, a desperate plea for connection in the void. Sarah! Kevin! Where are you? But the only response was the whisper of the wind outside, a cruel reminder of my isolation. I stumbled to my feet, the chill of the bus seeping into my bones, a cold that settled deep within me. I looked out the window, my heart pounding in my chest, and that's when I saw it, an empty expanse of snow, stretching endlessly, a desolate wasteland that mocked my despair. How long had I been here? It felt like days, but I knew that couldn't be right. The bus was covered in snow, as if we'd been abandoned in this desolate landscape, left to the mercy of the storm. Panic began to claw at me as I fought to steady my racing thoughts. Get a grip, Meredith, I whispered to myself, but the sound of my own voice did little to comfort me in the face of such overwhelming fear. I managed to open the door, flinging it wide against the bitter wind that rushed in like a wild beast. Snow swirled inside, and I stepped out into the cold embrace of the storm, the biting air stinging my skin. With no other choice, I began to trudge through the thick snow, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the very ground was trying to pull me back. The world was shrouded in a thick veil of white, and I could barely see beyond a few feet, the landscape distorted and unreal. Help! I called out, my voice swallowed by the howling winds, a plea lost in the chaos. But there was no answer, only the oppressive silence of the snow-covered world, a void that echoed my despair. I felt the weight of despair pressing down on me, but I forced myself to keep moving, driven by the hope that I would find my friends. I couldn't give up, I had to find them. Time became a blur as I wandered through the snowy abyss, my mind racing with thoughts of what could have happened. My feet grew heavy, and my breath came in ragged gasps, the cold air burning my lungs. Despite the freezing temperatures, a bead of sweat trickled down my back as fear consumed me, a relentless tide that threatened to drown me. I stumbled upon what looked like a clearing, and my heart leaped, a flicker of hope igniting within me. Perhaps someone was there. But as I approached, the sense of dread deepened, coiling around my heart like a serpent. The clearing was empty, save for the remnants of what appeared to be a child's scarf, vibrant red against the bland white of the snow. It lay half-buried, a haunting reminder of the innocence lost. I reached for it, my heart aching at the sight, a painful reminder of my friend's absence. Where were my friends? My mind raced back to the figure in the snow. Had he taken them? I turned in a circle, feeling trapped in this nightmare, a sense of panic rising within me. Just then, a whisper cut through the silence, a soft, ghostly call that sent shivers racing down my spine, freezing me in place. "Help us!" The voice was faint but unmistakable, filled with desperation that echoed in my heart. It was then that I knew my friends were still here, somewhere in this desolate landscape, and I had to find them. Driven by determination, I pressed forward, the wind howling around me like a malevolent spirit, urging me to turn back. The further I walked, the more disoriented I became, the world around me twisting into a surreal nightmare. Shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, and I could swear I saw figures moving just beyond the veil of snow, taunting me with their presence. I called out again and again, my voice growing hoarse, but my cries were drowned in the storm's fury, swallowed by the relentless winds. Hours passed, or perhaps it was merely minutes. Time was an illusion here, a cruel trick played by the endless white expanse that surrounded me. Finally, I collapsed to my knees, exhaustion overwhelming me, the weight of despair pressing down like a leaden shroud. As I caught my breath, the whisper returned, clearer this time, like a beacon in the darkness. In the woods, the words were a mere breath against my ear, chilling me to the bone, sending icy fingers creeping down my spine. I looked around, questioning my sanity, but deep down, I knew it wasn't my imagination. It was a call I could not ignore. Finding strength I didn't know I had, I pushed myself to my feet once more and stumbled toward the trees that loomed in the distance, their dark silhouettes a stark contrast against the white backdrop. The branches hung low, heavy with snow, and I felt an unnatural pull toward the dark embrace of the woods, a beckoning that promised answers. I stepped beyond the tree line, and the world shifted around me. The air grew even colder, almost biting, and shadows danced between the trunks, alive and watching. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if beckoning me deeper into the heart of the forest. "Come closer." Following the voice, I tread carefully through the forest, each step echoing in the vast silence, my heart pounding in my chest. Suddenly, I stumbled upon an old cabin, half hidden by the trees, its presence both inviting and foreboding. Its wooden walls were worn and weathered, and the door hung ajar, creaking in the wind like a ghostly whisper. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling, fear mingling with hope. There was no reply, only the whispering wind that seemed to mock my desperation. I hesitated, uncertainty clawing at my mind, but the thought of my friend spurred me on, pushing me to take the next step into the unknown. As I crossed the threshold, the air inside was damp and stale, a musty scent that clung to my senses. The darkness clung to me like a second skin, and I squinted to make out shapes lining the walls. Old furniture lay scattered, dust swirling in the dim light, remnants of a life long forgotten. But it was what I heard that made my heart stop, soft cries, muffled and desperate, echoing through the stillness. "Help us, please!" Without a second thought, I rushed toward the source of the sound, my heart hammering in my chest like a drum of impending doom. I found a trapdoor in the corner, partially obscured by fallen debris, and the cries intensified as I pulled it open, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into the abyss, a gaping maw that beckoned me to enter. It was a risk, but I had no choice. I had to save them. I clambered down, each step echoing in the silence, and paused at the bottom, my breath hitching in my throat. The cries were louder now, filled with anguish and fear, a symphony of despair that resonated deep within me. "Anyone?" I shouted, but my voice bounced off the walls, swallowed by the darkness. Then I saw them, my friends, huddled together in a dimly lit cellar, their faces pale and wide-eyed with terror. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived as I noticed the bindings that restrained them, their wrists raw and bleeding. "Meredith!" Sarah cried, her voice breaking with emotion. "We thought we'd never see you again." I rushed to them, fumbling with the ropes, my heart racing as I worked to free them. "I'll get you out. Just hold on." As I worked frantically, I glanced over my shoulder, feeling a prickling sensation crawling up my spine, a sense of dread that something was terribly wrong. And then I saw him, the figure from the storm, standing at the top of the stairs, watching us with an unsettling grin that sent chills coursing through my veins. My heart dropped into my stomach, fear coursing through my veins like ice water. "Let them go," I shouted, my voice catching in my throat, but it felt futile against the darkness that surrounded us. He merely tilted his head, as if amused by my defiance. "They are part of the game now, just like you," he said, his voice dripping with malice. In that instant, I understood it was a trap. A sick game played out in the snow, and we were its pawns, caught in a web of terror spun by a twisted mind. I managed to free my friends, and we scrambled to our feet, adrenaline surging through us. The figure laughed softly, a chilling sound that echoed in the small space, a reminder of our impending doom. "Run if you can," he taunted, his voice a haunting melody that sent a shiver down my spine, but something snapped within me, igniting a fire of defiance. Fueled by rage and desperation, I charged up the stairs, my friends close behind me, the taste of freedom tantalizingly close. The door banged shut behind us, locked tight against the encroaching darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. But we didn't stop. The storm still raged outside, but we pushed through it, driven by the primal urge to survive, to escape this nightmare. I could hear the figure's laughter trailing behind us, a ghostly echo that haunted my every step, urging us to turn back. We stumbled through the snow, our breath visible in the freezing air, the cold biting at our skin. As we reached the edge of the woods, I turned back one last time, a sense of finality washing over me. The cabin was empty, swallowed by the storm, and the whispers faded into the night, leaving only silence in their wake. We made it, together, we survived, but the victory felt hollow, tainted by the horrors we had witnessed. But in the days that followed, as I sat in my room, a chilling thought loomed over me, a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. It had been a blizzard, but now it felt like a curse, an omen of something far more sinister. I could still hear the whispers, faint but persistent, calling out to me from the shadows of the storm, a siren song that beckoned me back to the darkness. And deep down, I knew that although we had escaped the cabin, the darkness would always linger, waiting for the next blizzard, waiting for the next game to begin, a game that would ensnare others in its icy grip, just as it had ensnared us. The shadows would always be there, lurking, watching, and whispering, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. On the outskirts of the city, shrouded in an aura of neglect and despair, stands a forgotten prison, a supermax facility ominously known as the Abyss. Its cold, uninviting exterior is marked by the scars of time, the crumbling walls telling tales of sorrow and fear, sending chills down your spine as you approach. As a psychological consultant tasked with assessing some of the facility's most special and dangerous inmates, I found myself drawn into a world far removed from the ordinary. These weren't your average criminals. They were supernatural beings of unimaginable power, demons with malicious intent, vampires lurking in the shadows, and even ancient elves whose very existence defied the laws of nature. Each time I stepped into that dark, foreboding place, an unsettling feeling washed over me, as if unseen eyes were watching my every move from the depths of the shadows. One of my main tasks during my time there was to interview old Vikram, a legendary and powerful ancient elf whose very name sent shivers through the hearts of those who dared speak it. He had been trapped within these walls for centuries, forced to witness countless horrors and the despair of countless souls. The first time I met him, I was taken aback by the intensity of his age-old gaze and the bone-chilling aura he exuded. He radiated an indescribable energy that felt both ancient and dangerous, and I could feel his magic swirling around me, almost like a living entity. As I prepared to record his experiences, Vikram flashed a strange, knowing smile, as if he were fully aware that I was caught in a battle with the darkness that surrounded us both. As our interviews progressed, I began to notice that the prison's security measures weren't as solid as they seemed on the surface. The alarm system frequently malfunctioned at the most inopportune moments, the surveillance cameras occasionally went dark without explanation, and endless secrets seemed to lurk just out of sight in the shadows. Over the course of several nights, inmates began to vanish without a trace, one after another, and rumors quickly spread that a demon had somehow escaped its cell, heightening my unease and making the atmosphere even more charged with dread. One fateful night, just as I was about to leave the prison after a long day, a piercing scream shattered the silence that enveloped the facility. It was the night guard's voice, echoing through the halls, followed closely by the sound of heavy footsteps and low, ominous murmurs. My heart racing wildly, I stepped out of my office, trying to locate the source of the noise that had disrupted the eerie stillness. The corridor was empty, devoid of life, the only sound being the flickering lights on the walls, which seemed to be signaling an impending event, a warning of something terrible about to unfold. I cautiously approached a unit that had once housed vampires, and my breath caught in my throat as I saw the metal door pried open, a deep trail of blood staining the floor beneath it. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized things had spiraled out of control in a way I could never have anticipated. Just as I turned to leave, a shadow darted past me, sending chills racing down my spine. I whipped around, but nothing was there, just the eerie silence of the corridor, amplifying my sense of dread and foreboding. Days later, chaos erupted in the prison once again. Several inmates were found dead, their faces twisted in agony, as if they had endured endless suffering before their demise. A few guards went missing under mysterious circumstances, and the news spread like wildfire, saturating the prison with an overwhelming sense of fear and paranoia. Panic set in among the staff, who began to point fingers at each other, desperate to find someone to blame, and rumors flew like wildfire, plunging the entire facility into a state of terror and confusion. I started to suspect that old Vikram's purpose was more than just sharing his story with me. His gaze often lingered in the dark corners of the prison, hinting at something deeper and more sinister than I could comprehend. I decided to continue my interviews, driven by a need to uncover the secrets hidden within these walls. However, Vikram issued a chilling warning that sent shivers down my spine. Beware the truth you seek, it is dark and will consume you whole. His words echoed in my mind, adding to the growing sense of dread that enveloped me. Just when I was about to give up hope, another riot broke out in the prison. The inmates seemed to be incited by something malevolent, the whispers of demons echoing in their ears, plunging the entire facility into chaos and confusion. I fled into Vikram's solitary chamber, seeking refuge from the turmoil outside, but as soon as I stepped inside, a powerful energy enveloped me, sealing me in against my will. Vikram's gaze was complex and profound as he looked at me, filled with an understanding that sent chills down my spine. "You have been chosen," he whispered, his voice low and resonant. "You must pay the price for the sins of this prison. The truth lies in the darkness, but can you find it?" His voice rumbled like thunder, stirring my very soul and leaving me feeling both terrified and compelled. Gradually, I began to realize that the dark forces within this prison were not just demons and vampires. There were ancient curses and evils hidden here, lurking in the shadows, and Vikram seemed to be intricately linked to everything that transpired within these walls. I understood that to survive, I had to confront these heavy truths that weighed down upon me like a suffocating shroud. As more and more truths surfaced, I found myself unable to escape the dark reality that surrounded me. Every corner of the prison hid unspeakable secrets, and these secrets drew me into a vast conspiracy that I could not fully comprehend. My anxiety, fear, and despair intertwined, ultimately forcing me to plunge into the abyss of the prison, facing supernatural beings and the demons that lay within myself. I finally discovered the fate of the missing guards. Their bodies were hidden in a secret passage within the prison, an existence long forgotten, brought about by Vikram's dark power. Their deaths seemed to be part of a dark ritual, and my arrival here was just an unfortunate footnote in a much larger, sinister narrative. In the end, I returned to old Vikram, demanding he reveal the truth behind it all. However, he simply gave me a cold smile that sent chills down my spine and told me that the prison's fate had already been sealed, and I could not escape it, no matter how hard I tried. A strange light flickered in his eyes, and in that moment, I knew this was the crossroads of my destiny, where everything I feared would come to a head. Deep within the prison, I found myself trapped in an endless cycle of horror and despair. No matter how hard I struggled against it, I had to face my fears, confront old Vikram, and the darkness he represented. I realized that the terror didn't just stem from these supernatural beings. It was the despair of my own helplessness, lurking deep within me, feeding off my fears. At the story's end, I wandered the prison corridors, feeling as if everyone around me had been consumed by the darkness that permeated the air. I desperately sought an exit, yet I always returned to that eerie shadow that seemed to mock my every move. Every corner of the prison appeared to taunt me, mocking my ignorance and helplessness. And Vikram's whispers, like flickering flames in the dark, guided me deeper into the abyss, where I was destined to confront the darkest parts of myself and the horrors that lay within. Hope you enjoyed that spine-chilling experience. Now, let's move on to the next creepy tale. Ready to face more thrilling moments together? Let's dive into the next story right away. In this dark, damp city, where the nights are perpetually shrouded in thick layers of fog, I find myself struggling to navigate through the endless darkness that envelopes me. The chilling air hangs heavy, and the streets are dimly lit, casting eerie shadows that seem to whisper secrets of despair. Whenever the moonlight manages to filter through the thick clouds, casting a faint, ghostly glow, I feel the demons within me stirring, awakening from their long slumber. It's as if they finally found an opportunity to return to my life after years of being buried deep within. My palms grow clammy, my heart races uncontrollably, and fear wraps around me like a massive net, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. I sit alone in the corner of a bar called the Shadow's Tale, a dimly lit refuge where I can temporarily escape the harsh realities of life. This place has become my sanctuary, a haven where I can drown my sorrows in alcohol and forget my troubles, if only for a little while. The bartender, Stacy, has been here for quite some time now. She always greets me with a warm smile, her eyes sparkling with kindness, as if she can see the darkness lurking just beneath the surface of my facade. I've tried many times to engage her in a deep conversation, to share the turmoil brewing inside me, but I'm always interrupted by the relentless whispers of anger that echo in my mind. Today, I order my favorite old-fashioned again, gripping the glass tightly as my thoughts are pulled back to memories I'd rather forget, memories that haunt me like ghosts in the night. As I sit there, my gaze wanders aimlessly around the bar, my heart heavy with unease and anxiety. I can't shake the feeling that something is about to go horribly wrong, that the darkness within me is about to spill out into the world. Then, like a ghost materializing from the shadows, the news hits me. A young woman has been found dead nearby, and the whispers of this tragedy spread swiftly through the bar like wildfire. My heart sinks like a stone, quickly followed by a wave of hatred and jealousy that crashes over me. That face flashes in my memory. She was someone I admired deeply, someone who once inspired me, and now she's become a haunting nightmare in my mind. Her untimely death fills me with an overwhelming rage at my own helplessness, rage at the cruel hand of fate that has snatched her away. Are you okay? Stacy's voice cuts through my dark thoughts, her eyes filled with genuine concern as she looks at me. I force a smile, but the anger simmering inside me only intensifies, boiling just beneath the surface. Her concern feels like a match struck against the darkness, igniting the flames that burn deep within me. I want to share my pain with her, to let her in on the turmoil that rages inside, but I remain silent, trapped by a powerful impulse that churns within me, urging me to act. As the night grows deeper, the bar's lights dim further, mirroring the heaviness of my mood. I see people around me lost in laughter and merriment, their joy starkly contrasting with the turmoil in my heart. It feels as though they are all targets of my jealousy, their happiness a painful reminder of what I lacked. That warm feeling of camaraderie inside me spreads uncontrollably, only to be ruthlessly consumed by the flames of anger. The whispers in my ears remind me that time is running out, that I can't remain a passive observer in this dark play. As the alcohol begins to take effect, my thoughts become hazy, and everything around me starts to distort, blurring the lines between reality and the chaos in my mind. Those innocent smiles become increasingly blinding, and the demon within me grows clearer, more defined. It screams at me, urging me to seek revenge, to take action against the injustices of the world. My hands start to shake uncontrollably, and the glass slips from my fingers, crashing to the floor, shards scattering everywhere, causing gasps of shock from those around me. What's happening? Stacy rushes over, confusion flickering in her eyes as she surveys the scene. I feel like I've lost control completely, my anger drowning out any semblance of rational thought. I want to escape this suffocating atmosphere, but my legs feel heavy as lead, as if they're rooted to the ground. The demon's whispers echo in my ears, relentless and deafening, like an unending thunderstorm, tearing at my heart and soul. You shouldn't hold back anymore, they say, their voices a twisted chorus. Take back your power, seek revenge. In that moment, I feel as though I'm standing on the precipice of an abyss, teetering dangerously close to the edge. I sense the boiling rage within me, a fierce desire to shatter the cheerful laughter surrounding me. The people in the bar have transformed into my enemies, and I am undoubtedly a puppet driven by the demon, completely losing myself in the process. With a sudden burst of energy, I rush toward the door, memories of the past flooding back into my mind, the smile of that woman buried deep in my heart. She was a ray of light that once illuminated my life, a beacon of hope in my darkest moments, and now I'm consumed by the suffocating darkness that threatens to engulf me. My hands tremble uncontrollably, and I can only follow the demon's lead toward the bloody scene that's about to unfold, drawn by an irresistible force. The people around me seem blissfully unaware of my presence. My heart is filled with anxiety, but stronger still is the endless impulse that drives me forward. I stare blankly at everyone around me, searching their eyes for that desperate opportunity to unleash the chaos brewing within me. Go on, take it, you'll feel immense joy. The demon's whispers rise again, more insistent now, as if singing a dark requiem for lives taken. Stacy notices my abnormal behavior as I approach the door and tries to intervene, reaching out to grab my hand. You need to calm down. What's going on? Those words, meant to comfort, only served to fuel the fire of my anger. Her voice pierces through the night like a sharp blade, stabbing at my most vulnerable spot, igniting my rage further. I want to flee this suffocating reality, but I feel like I'm falling into an endless abyss, with no way to escape the darkness that surrounds me. As Stacy gets closer, I feel anger and contradiction intertwining within me, as if she's the last flicker of hope before I plunge into the depths of despair. I'm at a loss, the outside world slowly blurring into obscurity, while that impulsive drive grows ever stronger, pulling me deeper into the shadows. Let it all end. The whispers become more urgent, like dark tides sweeping in to claim me. I struggle to break free from their grip, but that force grows stronger, as if there's no way to escape its suffocating embrace. Just then, the bar's lights suddenly blaze to their brightest, illuminating the darkness that has taken root in my heart. In that moment, I can no longer resist the feeling of being driven by the demon. The impulse within me surges, demanding to be unleashed. I have to do something. I murmur, the flames of hatred consuming me whole, devouring my reason without reservation or remorse. I reach out to Stacy, fear reflected in her eyes, and in a moment of blind rage, I push her away without mercy. In a cinematic moment, I see every person in the bar turning to look at me in terror, their once joyful smiles bursting like fragile bubbles, screams erupting like a cacophony of chaos. How do I deal with the darkness in this world? The demon's roar within me can no longer be contained, echoing in the recesses of my mind. In the next moment, time seems to freeze, and everything begins to twist and contort in the shadows of my soul, as if reality itself is unraveling. The demon revels in my heart, feeding off my despair, while I'm pushed deeper into the dark by my increasingly blurry sense of self. The bar transforms into a waking nightmare, no longer my warm haven, but a stage for my burning rage and unquenchable thirst for vengeance. I become the most terrifying devil in my heart, witnessing everything unfold, powerless as I linger on the edge of my own destruction. As fear spreads like wildfire, chaos erupts in the bar. The screams of people echo in my ears, a haunting reminder of my own descent into madness, as if they're the last cries of my escape from the suffocating grip of reality. No one will know that the true darkness has taken root in my heart, impossible to drive away or extinguish. In that endless nightmare, I become numb, feeling no fear, just an empty shell of a soul left behind in the wake of my own destruction. Perhaps the only escape lies in an endless struggle with the demon, a battle that rages on within me. Am I truly unable to find my way back in this desperate abyss, or will I be consumed by the darkness that threatens to swallow me whole? And at this moment, deep within my soul, that eternal whisper still lingers, echoing through the void, this is the beginning, and also the end. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Thank you for joining me on this thrilling journey through the shadows of life and death. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the little bell to get more spine-chilling tales from Whisper of Horror. Remember, every soul has a story, and here, we give them a voice. See you next time. Stay curious, stay cautious, and keep whispering horror.